Live. Boom. Okay. Hang on 1 second, Sophie.
Take your time.
All right, here we go. All right, folks, welcome back to live bookstore interviews. Super excited to have as my guest today, Sophie Scott. Sophie, welcome.
Hello, Guy. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. All right, so Sophie Scott, she's a practicing transpersonal psychotherapist and the founder of Balance, where she was also the editor-in-chief for 7 years, bringing mindfulness and mental health topics to the mainstream. She's written for Forbes, Wired, Luxe, and Thrive Global, as well as speaking at a variety of events and festivals, including Live Well Festival. Today, we're going to be talking about the new book is titled You Are Not Alone in This, Supporting a Loved One's Mental Health Without Losing Your Own. In this groundbreaking book, she draws on moving client stories, proven therapeutic techniques, and her own personal journey to help you navigate the emotional complexities of caring for someone with mental illness while still taking care of yourself. Sophie, welcome. Before we get going here, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
So I'm originally from London, and that's where I currently am too. I'm a born and bred Londoner.
Awesome. Okay, simple. All right, let's dive into it. Why this book? What was the impetus? What was the inspiration?
So the idea is that mental health issues, like all health issues, they don't just impact the individual. They impact the people around them, you know, the support system, the family. And there is not much out there. In fact, very few resources out there for the people that find themselves in the supporting role. So if 1 in 4 people we know struggle with their mental health, I suspect it's much higher. But if 1 in 4 people struggle, then what about those who are in caregiving roles or their loved ones? So that was really the inspiration behind the book, because we felt that there was a gap in the market, and I have had personal experience kind of growing up in a family sort of quietly affected by mental health struggles. I've later gone on to have my own mental health challenges, anxiety, burnout, panic disorder. And I'm also, obviously, as you said, a psychotherapist. So I work with lots of clients who have actually found to come into therapy because they themselves are so impacted by their relationship with a loved one who may be struggling with their mental health, particularly if that loved one isn't getting the support or the treatment that they need. So the individual ends up holding a lot of stress and anxiety themselves. We know, 55% of those in supporting roles end up experiencing depression themselves, and nearly 80% with anxiety. So yeah, this is a book based on personal and kind of clinical experiences.
It's a really interesting topic because I think you cited 1 in 4, and you said probably higher than that, which I would agree.
Yeah.
But this is an interesting topic because of the stigma, right? It's stigmatized even to talk about one's own mental health issues. Now we're bringing in this caregiver to talk about it. And let me get a little pointed here. What was your own experience? How did that feed into this book?
Sure. So it's something I speak about in the introduction. My mother, who sadly passed away when I was a teenager, when I was 14, from cancer, she was gorgeous and effervescent and a wonderful person. But behind closed doors, she was gripped with obsessive compulsive disorder. She would kind of manically clean the house from top to bottom every day. And it was really difficult to live with. I suspect that there was something else, that it was her way to help regulate herself. So maybe there was a hyperactivity disorder or something else that was going on. But there was very little language for this then. And I grew up, my sister, who I'm incredibly close with, who's Vicky, who I think you may know. She's listening in on this, I'm not sure. But after Mum passed away, she experienced a kind of survivor's guilt, because she'd spent a lot of time trying to get mum help and get her into therapy. My sister's, you know, quite considerably older than me, and she had, you know, intrusive thoughts that sort of turned into violent intrusive thoughts. And really it was all anxiety and feeling like she failed my mum, and so she started to persecute herself. And so because we're so close, she sort of lent on me quite a lot for reassurance. So you could say that maybe my sister had savior complex over my mum, and I had savior complex over my sister. Ultimately, my sister, Vicky, got, you know, the help and support that she needed, and has done a lot of work on herself. And she's now herself amazing psychotherapist who actually specializes in working with clients with intrusive thoughts.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, that's a little bit of my own background. So sort of growing up around people maybe who are like fairly obsessional and always thinking, well, I'm fine. Like, what's wrong with all these people?
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, experiencing my own obsessional mind, my own anxiety, and, you know, so I've been on both sides of that coin. And it's something that, you know, a key theme in the book is that mental health is on a spectrum, and actually any number of factors can push you up or down on that scale. So very much, you know, I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. It's not an us versus them, you know, anything can kind of hurtle you into the abyss. We're all on the precipice. And actually,
Definitely. When you would say us versus them, you mean like I don't have mental health issues. They have mental health. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Because the book is aimed at those who are in a supportive role. You know, you may come to this book and think, yeah, I'm a supportive, I mean, you know, I'm in a supporting role. There's nothing wrong with me. I have no mental health issues. And what I'm saying is, firstly, that's not true. You're a human being. Like, we're all somewhere on the spectrum. Like, all of us have existential anxiety alone just through being born, right? Mm-hmm. So to try and understand the depressed part of oneself, the anxious part of oneself, the psychotic part of oneself, and actually that can help to foster so much more empathy, I think, for your loved one. But also to look at your own role rather than just pointing fingers and thinking that the problem always lies outside of yourself and with the other person. You know, there are dynamics that can be set up in all relationships, you know, especially maybe if one of you is struggling with your mental health, things like codependency and stuff. And in the book, I say it takes two to tangle. So, you know, let's all look at our own stuff before we just think, oh, I'm this martyr who's just in a total supporting role for everybody else. Even though, you know, there may be an element of truth to that, I think it's really important that we lessen the divide and we realize that we're all one and we're all connected. So
let me remind everyone I'm speaking with Sophie Scott. Her book is You Are Not Alone in This. Is the book out?
I have a copy here, but the book is not. The book is available for pre-order, and it's officially out on the 14th of January.
Okay, and we'll have links up to pre-order. So when you sat down for this to write this book, you mentioned, you know, it's not us versus them. What are some other things that you wanted to communicate?
There's a lot, you know, in the book.
And before you answer that, who were you talking to when you wrote this book?
Well, I think that I was certainly speaking to my younger self who could have benefited from reading this book. But actually, the book is essentially in two separate parts. So the first part is about caring for your loved one. And I'd say it's perhaps a more practical guide, the first half. So it includes things like, you know, how to have difficult conversations if your loved one is refusing to see that there's an issue or refusing to get help. We look at different diagnoses and how you may tailor your communication based on those.
Mm.
But I do, really want to make the point that I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a psychotherapist. It's not my business to diagnose anybody. But that there are certain things that can be helpful to be aware of. I talk about a holistic care plan and being aware of that. Psychiatry is just should be one aspect, one component of a treatment plan. And that's something I'm really passionate about. I practice, an integrative type of psychotherapy. So the idea of like, why should two people with depression be treated in exactly the same way? Well, what are the other factors that need to be taken into account? Health factors, lifestyle, if someone has a sense of purpose in their life or not, things like that can make a massive difference. And indeed looking at crisis planning and what to do in an emergency. So that's the first half of the book. And then the second half of the book is about caring for yourself. And I think that probably that's the unique angle that this book takes, which is, okay, it's really important, to be armed and to learn tools so that you can be the best support that you can be for your loved one. But actually, you can't support anyone from an empty cup, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
So let's think about yourself. How are you managing your stress levels? Talk about burnout and looking out for those warning signals and understanding if you may yourself be in fight or flight, hyperarousal, or if you might have gone into hypoarousal when you're sort of like a bit frozen. So we look at the kind of the animal kingdom and how they deal with stress and the sense also of collectiveness. And then the final part is about caring for the relationship. And I give an analogy that like relationships are a bit like biospheres, in that everything that's, and I'm not a biologist, by the way, I flunked biology at school, but it's always struck me as a really interesting analogy, the sense that every living organism is interconnected. So I'm reliant on a certain amount of, let's say, oxygen, and then that paves the way for you to be able to thrive. So therefore, if something's not working for one person in the relationship, then it isn't working for the relationship. And so, I think that when we start to look at things in that sense, you can start to take your own experience much more seriously and your own self-care much more seriously. And that's the point of this book, really. So whilst it's fantastic if you can be the best supporter for your loved one that you can be, you have to first be able to do that for yourself, and to maybe step out of the sense that, I'm the one that's there to fix anybody else. Well, what is it maybe in yourself first that you need to think about fixing or looking at?
Intense. I mean, it is intense because it's not. You're inviting the reader to really do this self-reflection and this awareness. I mean, you talked about, not, judging others and not, it's not us versus them. Let's go back to the first part where you talked about, broaching the topic of maybe there's something going on here with your loved one. How the heck do you do that? I mean, that's not obviously not easy. How does one go about talking, raising that topic with someone?
It's so hard. And I think firstly, just to acknowledge what a difficult predicament that is to be in, when, somebody that you love so much isn't seeing things in the way that you are, you're not able to get through to them. It's really difficult, and there are no clear-cut answers.
Right.
But something that I speak about in the book is a sense of letting go of being right and instead being curious, so like curiosity builds bridges. So rather than telling somebody something, being curious, why, understanding why might they be reluctant to get help? Why might they be reluctant to see that there's an issue? Because the truth of the matter is there's probably very good reasons for why people, want to avoid a diagnosis or, seeing a psychiatrist, right? Because people have really bad experiences and there's still, unfortunately, so much stigma attached to these.
Mhm.
And so to have curiosity and listen, really to be able to actively listen to somebody else is so powerful. I mean, we know that it can almost change someone on a cellular level, and it's such a powerful tool. So yeah, things like that, really asking open-ended questions, being curious, not telling anybody anything. Um,
Let me just interject if I may. I mean, I love that. As soon as you started to talk about that, I literally felt something like shift in my body. And I don't often say this, but it's so easy, right, for many of us to say, "What are you doing? There's obviously something wrong. Why aren't you getting help?" Blah, blah, blah. It's so easy for a lot of us, not all of us, but for many of us to go there.
Totally.
And you're asking us to slow down, be curious. That's a 180.
It is. And I say this with humility, like I struggle as much as the next person with this, and it's a lesson that I continue to go on and certainly have been on, not just in my personal life, but also professionally. I remember when I first wanted to do training to become a psychotherapist, and I was asked why, and I said, oh, because I really feel I can help people. And I remember my amazing tutor at the time, she said to me, that's not a good reason. What do you mean? And it took me like a long time to understand what she was talking about. But actually, now I get it. When you are, what are you doing? Like trying to fix someone or thinking that you know what's best for them. You don't, And actually, I've had to really watch that in my own therapy. I mean,
Mhm.
as a therapist, I think very early on when I was training, it was almost like sometimes, like barking motivational orders at somebody, um, and it's actually detrimental to the work because the change always has to come from within. Um, and so being able to, as they say, detach with love, it's a life's works lesson, but a really important one that I've learned as a therapist, as I say, as well as personally in my very close relationship, let's say, of the book, to respect everybody's autonomy. Um, mm.
Having said that, what would you say is and I realize there are no absolutes here, but what is the role of the caregiver?
I think,
Or roles?
yeah, I think it's a high. I think it depends on the situation in hand. I mean, my view is to, in the book, I talk about the 5 factors that will enable you to offer the best support you can to your loved one without losing yourself. And the first one is about trying your best, your very best, to see that they have a personalized and a robust treatment plan in place. But, if that is not possible, then it may be that actually it's about keeping them safe. I'm thinking about, for example, with addiction,
Mhm.
obviously, and this is a deeply personal thing that only the individual can answer, but you do your best, you keep doing your best. But obviously, there may come a time where, for example, somebody will not stop using. But the most compassionate and the most caring thing you can do is to make sure that if they are going to use, they use in the safest way possible, for example.
Mhm.
So, that's at the very extreme end, right? So I think it's about being an advocate for your loved one, being, keeping their confidence if they talk to you about things, um, but also recognizing, so that was the first one, but the other 4 factors in the book that I speak about are really about you looking after yourself so that you are resilient and strong enough to be that support, so that
Mhm.
you don't then take on their trauma and then everything
Mhm.
gets muddled and actually you can't really support them. So
Mhm.
the other ones are, learning to process your own messy feelings, because you will have messy feelings, ambivalent feelings towards your loved one. I mean, we all do anyway. So, to be able to process and accept those, to actively seek support for yourself. We know that loneliness absolutely increases the chance of caregiver burnout.
Mm.
And then finding a purpose that is uniquely your own. So that means something that is separate from your role, as from your supportive role. Um, I think that those things enable you to provide much better support, and that's what some of my research and research just in general about caregiver burnout really backs up. That practicing self-care, is not selfish. It will enable you to actually provide much better support for your loved one, and it mitigates the likelihood that you will burn out in the process.
What I love, first off, again, we're speaking with Sophie Scott. The book is "You're Not Alone in This." What I love about what you're saying is it seems like you've really taken a holistic approach to this, and it feels like you're holding not just space, but you're holding the caregiver and the other person in your arms with compassion. I
Oh,
can I
yeah.
can feel it. It's yeah, it's very moving. Now, as we kind of wind down here, Sophie, I want to ask you, and this is I think obviously a tough question, but looking back with your own experience with your mom, I'm sure you like, "Oh, I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that." What, can you talk a little bit about that? Is there anything? Can you share something maybe you wish you could have done?
Um, I mean, I was 14 when my mum passed away. So actually, I've think I've got to a place where I'm at peace that there's nothing else I could have done, um, because I was a minor, but actually because at any age there are limits, right?
Yeah, of course.
And a framework that I really like that resonates with me that I mention in the book is of my work, your work, and God's work. And I don't think, I'm not a religious person. I don't think you have to be religious to believe in that. But God's work, whatever your belief is, if it's those kind of like force majeure moments, or, COVID, or, things that are like outside of anyone's control, I think it is really important to be able to, and it's not easy, but to be able to stay in your wheelhouse of like, well, what is my work? And then what is their work? And to be able to somewhat relinquish with
Mm,
love, um, any control that you may have over their work, and then also to trust in God's work, which isn't always easy.
yeah,
But I think that that's the thing that's given me peace.
well said. Sophie, I want to thank you so much for being here. Love to have you back, bring you
Yeah,
back on the podcast.
yeah.
Super inspiring. Thank you so much. We'll be in
I really
touch.
enjoyed our chat. Thank you, guys.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.